Hi everybody, welcome to the second cyber defense recording. We did not record the broadcast this week at school, so I wanted to go ahead and make a video for you now to kind of go over everything that we went over during the session. And it might even work out better because hopefully this will have less interruptions and we can just go ahead and get to the material. So, we're going to be covering SSH. I'm Mike Powell, and we're going to be going over a little bit about the uses of it and how to use it and what it does. SSH is a popular program used in Linux. It stands for Secure Shell. SSH is used as a cryptographic network protocol for secure data communication. So what that means is SSH is encrypted. So if somebody intercepts your SSH communication, they're not going to be able to read it without knowing what the password is. Now SSH also is server client based. So that means you have to have a server and a client. And on that server, let's say it's a Linux box that's serving SSH, you have to have the SSH port open on your firewall, and you have to have SSH running on that port. Now, typically that's port 22, but you can change it to be whatever port you want it to be in your SSH server configuration. So basically the SSH client connects to the SSH server, and it will give you access to that remote machine. Now there are two versions of SSH. You have SSH version 1 and SSH version 2. SSH version 1 is old, has security vulnerabilities, and so it's not recommended to be used. You should use SSH version 2. And by default, if you install the latest OpenSSH server on your machine and you install the latest OpenSSH client, it's going to be using version 2. So let's move on. Alright, so we're going to talk about some of the uses of SSH. First and foremost, what I probably see the most and what most people do is secure remote terminal access. So what that means is you open up SSH and you use it to terminal into another Linux computer. Typically Linux, it could be Windows, but SSH is native to Linux. So what that means is, on your client computer, you will SSH to the server, and once you successfully do that, you will have a prompt that represents a session on the remote computer. So when you run a command, it'll be run on the remote computer versus your local computer. SSH can also be used for secure file transfers. This is things such as SCP and SFTP. Pretty much they function the same way. It's encrypted file transfer, meaning I can transfer one thing from my computer to a remote computer, and if that transmission was to be captured by an enemy, they wouldn't be able to read it because it's encrypted. So this is very cool because by default, FTP, which is another file transfer protocol, is not encrypted. So when you log in with a username and password over FTP, if someone were to capture your packets between you and the remote computer, they would be able to see your username and password. They wouldn't have to try and decrypt any type of encryption. They would just be able to see it because it's sent in what's known as plain text. Okay, the next thing is port forwarding / tunneling. What that basically means is, let's say I have, for example, a web server, and it runs on port 80, and it's on a remote computer running a website on port 80. Well, let's say I don't want to make that website available to the whole world. I only want to make it available to me whenever I log into that computer. Well, what I can do is I can not set port 80 on the remote computer to be available to the outside world on the firewall. But what I do is I make it locally available only. And then on my SSH client, I forward port 80 to the remote machine. So then what ends up happening is, if let's say I open up a Firefox browser, I would go to my own port 80 via 127.0.0.1:80, but instead of going to my local computer as it normally would, it gets forwarded over SSH to the remote server, and I see the remote server's website. And you can do that with any port. You can do that with FTP. You can do that with, port 80 for web. You can do it with web proxies. Basically any communication you want to encrypt. The next thing you can use SSH for is called X forwarding. And what that means is you can actually get a graphical window of a process running on the remote machine. So not only can you get a command line of the remote machine through SSH, you can actually get graphical windows of the remote machine through SSH, which is pretty cool. Some things are easier to do through the graphical window, and if you want to do that, you can pull it up by X forwarding over SSH, and again, that traffic is going to be encrypted. That's the great thing about it. You can also use it for securely mounting remote file systems. This is SSH-FS, and basically that just means you can have a share on a remote computer, and you can mount it on your local computer. Say if it was Windows, it would be kind of like assigning it a drive letter. Let's say a drive letter M. But whenever you double click M, it's actually showing you the folders on that remote machine. But to your computer, it looks local. So that's kind of what that is. All right. And that's all of that. We're going to get to some hands-on. I've made 2 virtual machines here. We're using CentOS Linux. Over here I have CentOS 1, and over here I have CentOS 2. And down here you can see where I have the information for this computer, and over here you can see the information for this one. So it's just 2 virtual machines running on my computer. And also, I will tell you, I've set up for the recording, whenever I left click, it's kind of like a purplish, I just kind of made it L for lavender. So whenever I left click, you should be able to see that. And then whenever I right click, it should show you red. And then when I'm just moving the mouse, it should be yellow. So you can kind of keep up where the mouse is. So I'm going to go ahead and log into these machines. Okay, we got our 2 machines here, and I've brought up 2 terminal windows on these machines because I'm going to try and do a lot of it from the terminal for you. So I'm on CentOS 1 here, and let's say I wanted to go to CentOS 2. I could do that using SSH. First, on CentOS 2, let me make a file so we'll know when I'm on the other system. Alright, I'm in the home folder on CentOS 2, so let's make a file called test. And I'm going to put, this file is on CentOS 2. And I'm going to save it. Alright, so when I do a ls again, there it is. Okay, and I'm going to show you ls. You see I don't have a test file in CentOS 1. So here's the basic command for SSH. It's SSH space username that you want to SSH as at the server name. Now you could put the name or the IP address. Since these are just virtual machines, I haven't set up any DNS, so I'm just going to be using the IP address. So you see I use the IP for this computer over here. I'm going to check it just to be sure. ifconfig shows me that this computer is indeed 192.168.49.132. So I'm just going to clear that out. And I'm going to press enter. And it's going to tell me that this host, basically the authenticity can't be established. That's because I've never logged into it before, and I've never downloaded its fingerprint. Just type yes, and it added it to the list of known hosts. So now I'm going to type the password for CentOS number 2. So you can see that's password 2. So type password 2. Let's see, make sure I'm in the window. There we go. Now you notice a couple of things. It tells me the last time I logged in, which is today. Earlier today I was testing. And then you see I'm now Mike at CentOS 2. And that's because I've logged into the CentOS 2 machine. Now when I do a print working directory, you see I'm in home Mike. And when I do a print working directory over here, I'm in home Mike. So now I can do a ls, and now you see that test file. So I'm going to cat it, so I want to see the contents. And it says this file is on CentOS 2. So now, whenever I am running a command, I'm doing it on the CentOS 2 machine, even though technically, physically, over here, I'm in the CentOS 1 machine. So that's kind of how that works. To get out, you can simply type exit, and you'll notice it'll say my connection was closed, and my prompt has now changed back to Mike at CentOS 1. So now I'm no longer logged into CentOS 2. Okay. So that's basically it for just how to SSH by remote terminal into another computer. Very useful. This is, useful for managing the systems, because if you know how to do a lot of things from command line, you can quickly just SSH into another computer and manage it real fast, and then disconnect, and it doesn't take much time at all. Now the next thing I'm going to show you is something called SCP, which is secure copy. Remember we talked about that earlier. That's encrypted file transfer. So I'm going to look at my files in here. Alright. So I want to make a file called copy. And I'm going to insert into it. I'm going to say this file was made on CentOS 1. Press escape, :WQ to save, and ls. So here you can see my file copy. And if I do a ls over here, I only have test, I don't have copy. So let's say we wanted to copy that file from CentOS 1 to CentOS 2. And let's say, they weren't virtual machines and they weren't computers next to each other. You couldn't just easily take a USB drive and copy it from one to the other. You got to do it over the network. Well, an easy way to do that is SCP. SCP. If you want to see the syntax, again, you can always do man for the command, and it'll show you information about the command, all the different flags that you can use. But I'm just going to be doing a very basic setup. I'm going to do SCP, and the way it works is SCP from source to destination. So I can actually SCP from either machine. For example, I can put like this. I'm going to say home mic copy. And after I type one letter, I'm pressing tab. You know, Linux will let me finish that out. So that means my source is going to be home mic copy. And now I need to do my destination. Well, my destination is going to be mic at 192.168.49.132. Now this is the same syntax you use the SSH. Now I'm going to put colon. And that means the colon separates where I'm going to where I want to put it. And I'm going to put it in home mic. And put a dot there to say I want to put it inside of home mic. So this command basically says I need to take this file called copy and I need to put it on this computer in this location. So let's go ahead and run that. Now you'll notice because I'm SSHing to the remote machine, it's going to ask me what is mic at 192.168.49.132's password. So again, it's going to be this password, the password of the remote machine. So password 2. And it gives you some little statistics. All the files that were copied, you can see this one was done. And it basically, since it's such a small file, it didn't take any time at all. Basically instant. So now we'll go over here to CentOS 2 and do ls. And you can see I now have the test file. And if I vim test, oh, sorry, it's the copy file. There we go. So if I vim copy, this file was made on CentOS 1. So I've copied it from CentOS 1 to CentOS 2. Alright, let's clear this out. And we'll clear this out. Alright, so we've seen how to SSH from one computer to another, and we've seen how to use SCP. I'll go ahead and show you the other way to SCP. Let's do an ls, and I'm going to rm for remove copy. So now you see I don't have a copy on my CentOS 1 box. If I want to get the versional copy that is over here, all I have to do is do SCP source and destination. So this time my source is going to be mic at 192.168.49.132 home mic copy, and the destination is going to be a local file, so it's going to be home mic dot, and just press enter. It'll ask me for the remote machine's password again, so password 2, and you can see it happens. So now you can see I now have the copy file in my folder over here. If I vim copy, this file was made on CentOS 1. So you can see all you really have to know is SCP source destination. It doesn't matter if the source is a local computer or a remote computer. It also doesn't matter if the destination is a local computer or a remote computer. Technically, you could have the source and the destination be two remote computers. So you may not be copying a file to or from the one you're working on. You may be copying it from one remote computer to the other. All you have to do is make sure you get your syntax right. Username at the IP address or the host name of the computer you're trying to do, colon, and then the file path. That's all there is to it. Alright, so let's clear that out. Okay, so the next thing, remember I talked to you about the graphical files, or programs that you can use on Linux. One example is, I'm going to do it on CentOS 1 over here, gedit. This is kind of like Notepad if you're comparing it to Windows. It's a graphical text editor, so you can type things here, and you can save them, you can print them, you know, graphical text editor. Now notice again, my terminal window is now caught up serving this window. And only once I close this window, I'm going to close without saving, do I get my terminal back to where I can use it. Well, remember, there's a way you can send a process to the background. I'm going to do gedit ampersand. And I get a gedit window, and notice it made a process 5279. So now I'm still able to use my command terminal, and I can use my gedit window. And again, now that I know what that process number, I could kill it from command line 5279. And notice my gedit window went away. Okay, so there's gedit. I'm going to show you also the GNOME calculator. So this is what the GNOME calculator looks like. And we'll look at the GNOME system monitor. This is your system monitor, and this is, I guess if you're comparing it to Windows, it'd be kind of like Task Manager, or the resource monitor, where you can see your CPU usage, your RAM usage, your network usage. So that's basically what this looks like here. Alright, now I'm going to show you another program that's pretty cool called MobaXTerm. Alright, and this is a Windows program, so right now I'm on my Windows computer at home. And this is a program where you can create new SSH sessions, Telnet, RSH, all kinds of things. SSH will probably be the one you could use most. But I'm going to show you, I'm going to connect to Cobra, one of the department servers, and I'm at my house, so I'm just connecting to it. There we go. And you'll notice a cool thing about MobaXTerm, and I'll put a link in the description. MobaXTerm, right here, automatically opens a SFTP window. So remember we talked about file transfer over SSH. You can do SCP or SFTP. Well, it automatically opens a SFTP window, and you can drag and drop files from your local machine to the remote server right here. I mean, this is just like a file, browser just like you would see on Windows, and you can drag and drop files to it. So that's a really easy way from Windows to drag and drop files to your Linux system. Now you notice here I'm on Cobra, and if I do top, I can see processes that are running on Cobra. So I'm SSH'd into Cobra right now. But a pretty cool thing that I can do is, like I said, remember X forwarding? Well, MobaXTerm actually has an X server built into it. And on Windows, if you're going to forward X programs to your Windows box, you have to have an X server, because it doesn't understand the language of Linux window graphics. You got to have an interpreter, kind of like a go-between, and that's what an X server is. An X server is actually what does run on Linux to provide the Windows as well. So with that running, And on my remote machine on Cobra, I have to allow X11 forwarding, which I've done. Now I can actually type gedit, and it should open me up a gedit window. And you'll notice this is actually the Linux gedit on Cobra. You can see on cobra.cs.mercer.edu. So what I can do, let's make a directory called test, and let's go into test. And I did a ls, and you saw there's nothing there. I'm going to do a print working directory, so I'm in root test. Okay. Normally the way I would make a file is to vim it, right? That's a command line text editor. Well, this time I'm going to just run gedit. And I'm going to, now you see I have my window here. I'm going to say this is made using gedit on my home computer over SSH. And I'm going to save it. And I'm going to save it in root test. And I'm going to call this graphical window. And save. And I'm going to close this. So now if I do a ls, you see I have a file there called graphical window. And if I were to cat it out to see what's in it, it says this is made using gedit on my home computer over SSH. Again, just to show you, I'm going to show you the GNOME calculator. And here is a calculator that's running off of cobra.cs.mercer.edu. Close that out. And let's take a look at GNOME System Monitor. And you can see this is the system monitor of Cobra, except I'm sitting on my home computer and I'm receiving this using X11 forwarding over SSH. So you can see the CPU usage, the memory usage, and the network usage. Okay. I'm going to minimize that out. And I'm going to log back into my machines. Password 2. And password 1. Alright, I'm going to clear that out. Alright. So now I'm back on my machines. So far you can see SSH is pretty useful. It's a neat little program. Has many uses to it. But one thing that you cannot do is you can't make scripts that utilize SSH to a remote machine in Linux, because you have to type in the password every time you SSH to another machine. Basically the reason for that is, of course, you have the password and they want to do authenticate you are who you say you are. But if you try and script it, you don't have an opportunity to type in your password. And Linux doesn't want you putting your password just in an unencrypted text file, just like make a text file and put your password in there and tell a script to use that. But here's one thing you can do. If you want to be able to log in from one computer to another using SSH without a password, you can generate SSH keys and copy them from one computer to the other. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that. Let's see where we're at. We're in Home Mic. I'm going to do a ls-la, and I can see I have .ssh. Okay. Let's go to .ssh and see what's in there. Alright, I just have my known host file. And if you actually look at known host, you can see that's 192.168.49.132 RSA key. Remember when I first logged into 132, it says, hey, I don't know who this host is. I'm going to copy this key over. Is this okay? Well, this is where that key is stored, and this is that key. You can see it's, I mean, to the human eye, it's just a bunch of garbage, but it's an encrypted key. Okay. So I'm going to print my working directory again. It's home username.ssh is where a lot of your SSH things are stored, like your keys. So let's say I want to be able to log in to CentOS 2 from CentOS 1 and over SSH, and I don't want to have to use a password. You know, I want to write some scripts that do things, and I just can't use a password. So let's do that. All right, first I have to generate keys on CentOS 1. So SSH -keygen-t. T is telling it what type of key I want to make. I'm going to make an RSA key. I'm going to press enter. All right, it's generating it. Where do you want to save it? I'm going to accept the default. And I'm going to leave passphrase empty. Just press enter twice. And you'll notice it says your public key has been saved. You know, the fingerprint is this. Here's a nice picture of it. It's a 2048-bit RSA key. Okay. Very good. Now, the next thing I have to do is I have to go over here to CentOS 2. And let's see where we're at. We're at home mic. Let's do a ls-la. And we don't have a .ssh folder. So I'm going to make a folder, make directory, .ssh. Okay. And we can see it's here now. Now it's important for your .ssh folder, you only want the owner to have access to it. And so I'm going to do that. Chmod 700.ssh. And what that does, this number represents owner permissions, this is group, and this is everybody else. So I'm saying 7 is full permissions, group has no permissions, and everybody else has no permissions. So now when I do a ls-la, you can see SSH, the owner has read, write, execute, and everything else is left blank. I'm going to go ahead and do that over here. Chmod 700.ssh. Okay. And I'm going to go back into it. And I'm going to do the same thing for my keys. I'm going to do a chmod 700 ID star. So now anything that started with an ID has 700 privileges. Okay, so now I have the keys on CentOS 1, and I've got the SSH folder on both of my computers. I need to copy from CentOS 1 to CentOS 2. And if you've been paying attention, you know an easy way to do that is SCP, right? So I'm going to SCP home mic.ssh, and I want to do id_rsa.pub. You need to copy your public key to the remote server. Okay? So mic at 192.168.49.132. All right. And I'm going to copy it to home mic.ssh and in that folder. All right. Press enter. Ask me for the password. Password 2. All right. Says it copied it. Let's come over here just to be sure. cd home mic.ssh. Do an ls. There's our id_rsa.pub. and it has the same permissions. Okay. Now, basically, we're ready. But here's the thing many people forget. By default, most SSH servers aren't set up to use keys. They're just set up to use password. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to have to SU, which stands for super user, because I need to become the root of this computer to make a change. So type SU. My password is password. So now you see I have a pound prompt. That means I'm the root. Alright. I'm going to cd to etc SSH. Alright. And in etc SSH, I'm going to do ls. You can see I have a lot of different things here. Most importantly, SSHD config. This is the configuration for our SSH server. So, I'm going to vim SSHD config and open it up. Now, this is what our configuration file looks like. You can see we're set to use the second version of SSH. The port number isn't specified, which means it'll use the default, which is 22. That's basically all that stuff is. Now here's the important thing. We got to turn on public key authentication. So I'm going to uncomment this line that says pub key authentication yes. And I'm going to uncomment this line that says where the authorized key file is. So I have .sh/authorized keys. So that's the name of the file that's going to allow authorized keys to SSH into this machine. So I'm going to press escape, :WQ to save. Now remember, configuration files for services are typically applied at load of that service. So my SSH server, probably nothing has changed, even though I changed the configuration file. I have to reload that configuration file. So the easiest thing to do is to do a service SSHD restart. And it's going to stop SSHD and it's going to restart it. Alright. So now I've made the changes. I've restarted the SSH server. One last thing, I'm going to exit out of root. I'm going to take a look again. Now remember, we told our SSH server that our authorized keys is called a file called authorize_keys. So I need to make that. And since it hasn't been made yet, and it's only going to have one key in it, I can actually just copy the id_rsa.pub. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it, which is rename it. I'm going to rename it authorized keys. So now when I do an ls, I have a file called authorized keys. Alright. And I'm going to do ssh-add authorized keys. And that's going to add in those keys into my SSH server. Alright. So now we should be ready. Let's clear it out. And let's have a go. So I'm going to SSH Mike at 192.168.49.132. And you guys see, it didn't ask me for a password. I'm Mike at CentOS2. If I do an ls, there's the copy and the test file. I'll come over here. I'll go to my home folder, which remember you can do tilde to get there. Do ls. So basically I'm on CentOS2 over here, and at no point did it ask me for a password. And that's very useful for when you're doing things like scripting, or if you're going to be SSHing to a computer over and over and over. Okay, so I'm going to exit, do a ls again. Actually, I'll go back to my home folder. You can see I'm back on CentOS 1. So literally, all I have to do, press my up key, SSH mic at CentOS 2's IP, and I'm in. That little bit of delay is it's actually looking at the keys and authenticating, because to, do all that isn't an instant thing, because the keys are so secure, and they're actually, 2048-bit encryption is, RSA is fairly secure. So that's how we do it. So now I can log in from CentOS 1 to CentOS 2 without a password. Okay. And that'll be all for this video. This past couple of weeks have been pretty much all Linux. We've gone over, the Linux file system, Linux commands, Linux executables, and then we focused on SSH, which is really, SSH, I really like it myself and use it a lot. Next week, we will be going over dynamic websites, particularly databases and e-commerce websites. And specifically, we'll be going over a database and an OS Commerce website connecting into that MySQL database. But thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.